Welcome into Mississippi State Live here on the Voice of College Football. Andrew Miller here on a Thursday evening. And it is a call-in show night here on the channel. Opportunity for you guys to come be a part of the stream. So hope to have some listeners, have some callers, chat, in action, all that fun stuff. Looking forward to tonight's show. As you can see in the title, we're going to be talking about the most important transfers for the Bulldogs this season because State needed to bring in a lot of transfers to make an impact for this roster. They've done that. As we graded on Monday's episode, kind of a mixed bag depending on the position group, but they've brought in plenty of talent to step in. A lot of guys that you're going to be counting on. Who are the guys that are most important for them to play big roles this season? So that's going to be the main thing we get into tonight. Appreciate everybody who's tuning in. If you could, leave us a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you were not already, and have those notifications turned on so you do know when we do go live. And if you can tell all the Mississippi State fans in your life about what we're doing here at Mississippi State at the Voice of College Football, send them my way. Get them to subscribe to the channel. Let's get those subscribers up. And, hey, if you know any SEC fans in your life, they don't necessarily have to be Bulldog fans, send them to SEC at the Voice of College Football. We have some great content over on our other channel as well. I want to continue growing both of those. Bulldog, Mississippi, Hail State to you, my friend. Glad to have you here in the chat tonight. Again, so with tonight being a call-in show, if anybody wants to come and join the stream, be a part of the action, you can do that by joining through the link pinned to the top of the chat and also in the description to the video. Just keep the camera turned off and bring you on stage. We can talk about whatever. I mean, mostly Bulldog football, but hey, if you got something else you want to get into, I guess besides politics, we won't do that on this channel, but we can talk about just about anything Mississippi State related or college sports related. We'll bring it up on the show. What's good with me? Not much. Well, okay, that's not – plenty's good with me. That's not the right response to that. I'm doing well. It definitely cold outside, which I like. I'm one of the sickos who enjoys this time of year when it does get cold, and I'm looking for the blast of cold air coming in over the weekend. Obviously – it's better if it's just cold and not ice. You know, that part sucks for the people across the state who were impacted by that. And again, still thinking of all those who, including those in Oxford who have been impacted with the ice storm. It's pretty rough. But the cold weather in general, something I do enjoy myself. So I'm doing well at this time. I had Taco Bell this evening, so that's doing good. If you see me sipping on a Taco Bell cup, that's why. Yeah, we could do without the crippling ice for sure. The ice is the part that sucks, and that's the thing that's so frustrating. Is down here in the South, I think a lot of us look forward to the idea of winter weather just because we don't get it much. But when it's in the form of ice, there's no fun with that. Ice isn't fun for anyone. If we're gonna get winter weather, at least let it be snow, which can still cause problems around here, but not quite the same as what happened. Unfortunately, with the ice storm moving through. So, yeah, thinking of everybody impacted by that. Hope you guys can get power back. Hope you guys can stay warm in the mix of all this cold weather. Again, so tonight we're going to be talking about the most important transfers for State because they've brought in several key players that you're expecting to play major roles on this team. But who are the guys that they most need to make an impact? So that's going to be the topic for tonight's episode. And, hey, we can get into it right here, which although I will say shout out to Mississippi State women's basketball. I don't want to jinx it by declaring anything, but about to take a near 20-point lead into the fourth quarter up in Knoxville against the number 15 ranked Tennessee team. Sam Purcell, by the way, I mean he deserves quite a bit of credit because look, he's taken heat for his team's not quite maybe living up to some of the talent that's been on that roster to this point in his career. But I'll be honest with you. When I saw the way things kind of fell for them, I mean, look, last year's team I thought would be a team where it's like, okay, maybe you're talking about NIT, and they ended up going to the tournament, winning a game. So already it was a great coaching job a season ago. Of course, Tennessee hits a shot right before the end of the third quarter, But then you look at all the players they lost off that team because, man, there was a world where you could be talking about Mississippi State coming into this year with a top 20 type team preseason in women's basketball if they had brought all those players back from a season ago. And, all those players hit the portal, which was rough, man. And I feel like it felt like, you had started to build something, had some momentum, and then all those players just hit the portal and leave, and you didn't manage to hold on to them. But And look, the transfer class that came in, it was not a group that stood out. You had some decent players that came in, but it wasn't like you were adding a bunch of these super high profile transfers either. The fact that one, he's got that group performing as well as they have, like the couple of returnees on the roster are performing well. The freshman class has obviously been outstanding. So, I mean, give Purcell a ton of credit for rebuilding this roster, that they've got a team that can be competitive and right now is on pace to be a tournament team. We'll see if they can close out this win. They need to make it a win. I shouldn't close out this game, rather. I guess I'm doing a great job of jinxing right now. But if they get this win, I mean, they're in a great position to continue moving along and be a tournament team this year, which if we're talking about Purcell being in the tournament 3 of his first 4 years in Starkville, I mean, that's doing a really nice job. He's done a great job with that team, so we'll see if they can close this game out. Getting in, though, to the topic for tonight, most important transfers from Mississippi State. Obviously, a lot of these guys are going to be incredibly important. State has signed a pretty large transfer class. I think it's like 27 players, something along those lines, that are coming into Starkville. I had the number in front of me, and then I switched over to a different tab, so we'll go with the 27-ish number. It's a big portal class that they're not technically done looking to add. I know there's the offensive lineman out of Navy who took the visit to Starkville that they're waiting to see if that's somebody who could step in. And look, I guess at any point, anyone on the offensive line would have a chance to contribute, frankly, when you consider that room and the help that they need there. But by and large, the portal class is pretty much set. And that's why early in the week we did our grades for the portal class. How do we grade every single position? So if you want my deep thoughts on every single room that State went after in the portal, go, and you didn't see Monday's show, go check that out, because I went into it and I gave grades for every position and a grade for the overall portal haul for State as a whole going into this season. What about, of those guys that are coming in, though, who are the guys that we're seeing playing a role? And I've got my 5 most important transfers for the Bulldogs. And right off the jump, number 1, I think it has to be left tackle Brandon Snee out of UAB. When we consider offensive line as the weak link of this football team a season ago, it was the weakest position on the field. I don't think that's a question. Some could argue defensive line. I would say even that group probably had more solid moments than the O-line did, although it's pretty bad on both sides. But the O-line was a group I thought you could look at and see guys and say, look, okay, they're at least SEC caliber players. Or so the D-line. Offensive line, you had a hard time saying that. And you knew it was a group that they were going to have to hit hard in the portal and bring in a lot of pieces to step in. And they've added a lot of bodies. Now, have they actually upgraded the room the way they needed to? That's where, if you haven't checked out Monday's pod, I really dove into it. It could be questionable, because at the end of the day, you brought in 8 transfers, but of those 8, you have one guy that was a starter in the SEC and was kind of an up-and-down player. You've got one guy that was a power conference backup and played a lot and at times played well, but still does not have that starting experience. And then you have one other guy that was a G5 starter who, again, performed well, but can he make the jump up? And then when you consider the guys that have left the room, even a player like a Javen James, who has been much maligned, you're kind of in a situation where these guys stepping in who have the little bit of experience are going to be players you don't have a choice. They have to step up and perform well. And I think of any of those spots, none are bigger than left tackle with Brandon Snee. And obviously this is a guy that has really worked his way up throughout his career, starting down in the D2 ranks and then working his way up to FCS. And then getting to the FBS level. First went to K-State, ends up transferring to UAB back last spring, but proved it at UAB. Performed well. Was a good player for the Blazers throughout the season. When he went up against Tennessee in Knoxville with that outstanding defensive line that gave Mississippi State trouble all day, I thought he held his own and performed well in that game. Now he's transferring up once again, and there's questions about his size. There's questions, is he going to be ready for this level? Can he truly be a guy that is a down after down starter for Mississippi State at left tackle? Those are all fair questions, but he doesn't really have a choice. He's probably going to have to be that guy. Obviously, there's other guys in the roster who could compete there. Miles McVay from North Carolina will have an opportunity to compete for that role. Maybe you could see Blake Steen competing. That's kind of it, though. If you land the transfer from Navy, okay, that's another body in the room who would have an opportunity, but I guess there's the JUCO guys as well. You could see maybe one of the JUCO players taking a step forward. But ultimately, they're kind of bringing in Brandon Snee as the guy that's got to be able to win this job and got to go out and perform well. And that's the most important spot on the line. If you don't have a left tackle, you're probably not going to be successful up front, kind of cut and dry. You've got to have somebody there that you trust can step in and perform well. And because of that, Brandon Snee got to be up to the challenge and got to be ready to go and be an impact player for Mississippi State. You could talk about the offensive line as a whole for sure. I do think everywhere else I could see them piecing it together. I talked about this a lot with Jordan Seaton when State was going after Seaton. If they had gotten Seaton, I would feel very good about, okay, they've got an elite left tackle from left guard to right tackle. These other guys can figure it out and you could make that work. The same does apply with Brandon Snee. If Brandon Snee steps in and plays really well, I think the other group can figure it out. The problem is if you don't get it working with Brandon Snee, one, you're in trouble just because, okay, well, that one spot being a position that's on an island and you're having to deal with some of the best pass rushers in college football, good luck. But two, then you got to start putting, okay, are we going to put other guys over there? Are we going to move guys around? How does that impact the rest of the line? You need left tackle to be locked down. Mississippi State needs Brandon Snee to be important. He's, aside from Kamario Taylor, because it's the quarterback and this incredible talent, there is not a more important player on the Mississippi State offense, in my opinion, right now than Brandon Snee. He's got to be a guy that can step in and perform well. So he's easily the most important transfer that State has going into this season. Number two, go to the spot opposite of him on the line of scrimmage, and that's Sam linebacker Amari Williams out of Florida State. This is a guy that does not have a lot of production to this point in his career. Not a guy who's necessarily gotten a ton of opportunities. He was splitting time between tight end and defensive end during his time at Florida State. As a freshman, was really playing more as in that tight end type role. Then last year still played tight end some, but also they put him on the defensive line. And 10 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, another quarterback hurry. Showed some flashes, showed you some promise, gave you some reason he could be a contributor at that defensive end spot or an edge rush spot, but has not gotten to consistently do it. Follows Zach Arnett to Starkville, and apparently is a guy Zach Arnett thinks very highly of, so much so that reportedly, or maybe allegedly is the better word, players like Caleb Herring, the transfer out of Tennessee who landed at South Carolina, Harvey Dyson, the transfer from Tulane who ends up at NC State, who play that position and were much more productive players in college football already. Allegedly, Mississippi State was not going to pay the asking price on those guys when they felt really good that Amari Williams could give them that type of production himself. So they're putting a lot of stock in this guy. And it's a risk, right? Because if it doesn't work out, well, then who do you turn to? Because at that position, you don't have a lot of answers right now. It's a situation where not only is that a spot where State's got to get better simply because the production hasn't been there in the past couple of years, you don't have guys on the roster with any sort of experience. Tyshawn Willis did not play last year and is going to be a redshirt freshman. Micah Nickerson steps in and, hey, man, now rated as like a top 50 or 40 player in the country by Rivals. That's a huge get for Mississippi State, although they screwed over Braylon Womack dropping his rating down. It's a huge, huge get, a guy that could be an impact player. He's coming out of high school at 215 pounds. You got to get that weight up if you're talking about him being able to play right away in college football in the SEC. So can you count on that guy to be a contributor right away as a freshman? That's probably an unfair expectation. Could somebody else already on the roster in that linebacker room step in? I know Darian Gillette has been talked about. Ty Lockhart has been talked about. Maybe one of those guys. But again, they haven't done it. Amari Williams is very clearly the player State is circling and saying, you're going to be the key player at that position. And it's an important position. When you think about what Arnett likes to do as a defense, in that 3-3-5, that is such an important role because you've got to be able to do so much. Yes, you got to be able to rush the passer. You got to be able to get after the quarterback, provide pressure. And that's the biggest thing State has lacked. But you've also got to be able to set the edge against the run. Maybe that was an even bigger problem for State last year than the pass rush side of it, was the fact that teams could just run right at that spot throughout the games, and State couldn't handle it because the guys they had out there on the edge could not block that spot. You got to be able to hold up against the run. you need to be able to drop in coverage and be a solid coverage player. Because if you have that guy as a guy who can drop out into coverage, that opens up the door for you to do more schematically. So much of the success that Arnett's defenses have had comes down to the fact that you create confusion up front, that between those three linebackers, you don't know who's rushing the passer and who's in coverage on a given play. They're always going to bring somebody. They might bring multiple somebodies, but you don't know where the pressure is coming from. That confusion is what leads to pressures and leads to sacks and leads to turnovers. If you don't have a Sam linebacker that you are confident can drop into coverage as well, good luck getting the effectiveness at that position that you truly need. So there's going to be a lot on the plate of Amari Williams and, frankly, whoever steps into that role. It's a big deal. And when you consider Amari Williams is just the guy at that spot, it puts all the more pressure in the world on him to be an impactful player for Mississippi State. I think he has got to be a productive player in year one. That's why he's my number 2 most important transfer for the Bulldogs. Number 3, going with Quentin Taylor from Iowa State. State got the best possible news it could have in the transfer portal by bringing back Kelly Jones. And you're getting this guy at cornerback that is already being talked about as a potential preseason All-American. A guy who could have gone to the NFL draft, and I don't know if he would have gotten that first-round grade. I think that's why he came back to school, obviously. But I don't think he's going past day 2. Could have made a lot of money going to play pro and been a guy who could contribute next year in the NFL. Mississippi State got him to come back. That's massive. That's huge. You have a shutdown All-American, Thorpe Award contender cornerback protecting one side of the field. You had all that last year. How'd the secondary perform down the stretch? Poorly. And a big part of that is because opposite of Kelly Jones with Diego Brumfield, Javen Williams, they couldn't cover. The Egg Bowl was a disaster for State's cornerbacks, not named Kelly Jones. You have to find somebody else who could step in and perform well at that position. You knew that was going to be a position of need in the transfer portal. You go out and get a guy that you think can handle that in Quentin Taylor, who last year for Iowa State got kind of thrown into a starting role, made six starts for the Cyclones, 27 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 5 passes broken up, which led the team. Was a good, solid corner, and still a young player. I believe it was his redshirt freshman season, so he's got time to grow and time to develop, but got that starting experience early in his career and played well when given that opportunity. Was also playing in a defense that's got some similarities to Arnett, at least structurally. I mean, Arnett, they do things differently, and they do stuff different from a coverage standpoint, but they're both 3-3-5 defenses, truly in terms of personnel. And the personnel is where there's a lot of similarities between the two. So he's kind of used to playing in that style of defense. This is a good addition to come in. And he's not the only corner State added. Obviously, they added a couple more guys in that room when you talk about Jamrock Grimsley coming over from Florida, and then Caleb Singleton out of Syracuse. Both young players with some high talent ceilings that, hey, if they put it together, could be really, really good players. You definitely up the overall talent. I still think of those 3, Quentin Taylor is the guy that you're expecting to be the contributor the most. And they need him to step in. You need to feel good that you got somebody opposite of Kelly Jones, because as much as having one lockdown corner is very important, if the other guy on the guy on the other side of the field is not someone that you can trust to go man coverage and hold his own, you're going to be in for a really long night defending the pass. So hopefully you got that guy in Quentin Taylor. You need him to have a big year for Mississippi State for sure. Number 4, I'm going back to the offensive line, and I'm going to talk about DJ Chester coming in from LSU. Mostly played center for the Tigers. Last year got some reps at tackle when having to fill in for injury. Probably the most high-profile get for State out of the portal, a guy that was a 13-game starter as a redshirt freshman in the SEC for an LSU team that had a fantastic offensive line. 4 starters get drafted in the NFL. Now, he was the weak link along that line, which you kind of expect. A redshirt freshman with a group of future NFL players. Okay. But he was the weak link in more than just the fact of kind of by default. It was also a little bit of the case that, hey, he was not dominant. It was not holding his own. He would get pushed back a bit, for sure. And because of that, he was a guy that LSU felt they needed to upgrade upon going into this past season. And he ended up becoming the swing player for the Tigers and had to fill multiple roles throughout the season. Got some starts at center once again. Also had reps at left tackle. I don't know about right tackle, but at least got reps at one of the tackle spots. Didn't have the year, that he would have liked to have had. This is still a guy, though, that's got a ton of starting experience in the SEC. This is still a guy that, frankly, you have seen be able to play in the conference and do well enough that he started a full season. And I've said this a few times. While I do think it's being overblown, he was an all SEC freshman player. Well, clearly that means he's a great player. Sometimes the freshman teams quite literally get selected by default because you don't really have options. So I don't take much away from that. He did not have a great season as a redshirt freshman. However, if he was truly unplayable, Brian Kelly would not have left him out there every single game. He would not have started every single game of that season. Clearly, he's got some ability. I've also talked about that the people around Baton Rouge, notably Matt Moscona, who's as locked in on the Tigers as anybody possibly could be, will tell you that he thinks there's a chance that guy could play guard and be really good at guard. And because State gets Cannon Boone back, you have the opportunity to put DJ Chester at guard. But the biggest reason this guy hits the top 5, I mentioned it earlier, you've only added 3 portal offensive linemen with significant playing experience. And only 2 of them with true starting experience. Brandon Snee was one, DJ Chester is the other. By default, you need this guy to contribute because of what you're losing everywhere else. And because you don't have other clear-cut options. DJ Chester was signed to be a starter for Mississippi State, cut and dry. If DJ Chester does not perform, Mississippi State's probably going to have a hard time up front. They have a couple other options that could step in at guard. Again, I don't think you need him to play center because you can go to Cannon Boone for that. But ultimately, this is a guy that you signed because you are expecting him to play a major role and be a starter for you in the middle of that offensive line or the interior. He's got to perform well. And if you don't get good performance out of him, again, that really starts to hurt things. So that's a big addition for State and a guy that you need to be the best version of himself. And I know the way I've talked about it maybe has been a bit critical that, hey, he's not necessarily this as high profile a transfer as maybe was led on. He's still a guy that's got a lot of starting experience in the SEC. And that counts for a lot. You need him to be a guy at State. Finally, number 5, I'm going with Marquise Johnson, the receiver out of Missouri. And this is a guy that for his career, over 1,000 receiving yards for the Tigers in 3 seasons, was a starter the past couple of years. Did not have necessarily the season he probably would have liked to this past year, 28 catches for 340 yards, 2 scores. In 2024, 25 catches for 352 and a touchdown. And then 2023 was actually his most productive year, 13 catches for 383 yards. It's a nearly 30 yards per reception and 3 touchdowns. Big play threat, true speedster, another guy that you're talking about 4.3 speed on the outside. So that's a major fit in what you want to do in this offense. And a guy that, especially the last 2 years, did not get to have the opportunities downfield in the passing game that you would have liked to have seen him get. I talked about this. When you go back and you watch the big plays that Marquise Johnson made at Missouri, so frequently those shots down the field should have been touchdowns and ended up just being first downs because he had to stop and go up for the football or he had to get to the ground to make an incredible catch. If you just put the football out in front of him and let him run in stride, he's scoring. And his numbers would be even more impressive to this point. And then this past year, Missouri just really lacked that downfield pass game. Everything ended up being in that intermediate range. It just didn't suit what he's going to be able to do and what best fits him. Mississippi State's offense suits players who want to go win one-on-one downfield, get deep. We saw Brennan Thompson, who kind of for his career, there's some similar levels of production for what he was doing at Oklahoma and then coming into Mississippi State. So Brennan Thompson has that massive season last year, sets a school record for receiving yards, was one of the top players in the country in terms of big plays, 40-plus yard receptions. I wish we were getting to see him in the Senior Bowl. I would love to see how he would test out there. I hate that he had to withdraw. But, I'm looking forward to seeing him tear it up at the Combine. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. You need a replacement for Brendan Thompson, though. That's the one big thing, is you're losing that guy. And Anthony Evans coming back is massive for that receiving core, but you need that guy that you trust. I could put him one-on-one on the outside, and he is going to win deep vertically more often than not. State needs a guy who can play that role. Marquise Johnson is the guy that fits that role really, really well. And I think he's going to step in and be a big-time contributor for State. On SEC Live, we did the most impactful transfer for every SEC team, and I picked Marquise Johnson for Mississippi State. Not because that's the position where State needs the most help. As I went through, there's 4 other spots that I think I would put ahead of him. But he's the guy that I'm most confident in. If there's one transfer, you tell me, who am I banking on having a big season for Mississippi State? If it's one transfer, it's Marquise Johnson. Because I see the skill set, I see the production he's had thus far, how he was utilized, and recognize what Mississippi State wants to do as an offense. He fits in as I think will have a massive year. Feel very confident in saying that for the Bulldogs. So he's got to be my answer there. And look, State does need him to be that guy. Opening up the middle of the field, opening up opportunities for Anthony Evans, hinges on having that guy on the outside that you trust can win one-on-one consistently. We've talked about the tight end spot. Who's the guy that's going to step in for Mississippi State and have a big year? You need someone who can fill that role, adds on the outside to open up spots for the tight end on the inside. You need those threats on the outside for sure. Because, look, if teams do not fear your ability to beat them downfield, it really cripples you as an offense. You need a guy like that. Marquise Johnson fills a very important role. Real quick, if I were to hit a couple honorable mentions, I almost put defensive lineman Dalen Evans or Dalen Evans from Texas A&M in here. Rotational player for Texas A&M, but a guy that A&M was expecting to be able to compete for a starting job going into this season. And a very talented player who has shown some flashes, someone that I know A&M did not want to lose. It was a big battle for State to get him with Tennessee, and that's a big recruiting win. That's a guy that I think will come in and probably be a starter for you for Mississippi State. But kind of the one thing there is, why I didn't put it as a top 5 most important. I think I'm a mark for Jere Bledsoe. I'm the Jere Bledsoe fan club leader, and I believe that he can be a big-time guy for State on the interior. I think you could see Calvin Dinkins finally get to that point. So I think there's other guys on the interior, that defensive line, that could be the leaders for you there, and you could be okay. Safeties. We could have talked about any of the guys coming in, like a Marcus Williams out of Rice, Kendall Dolby out of Oklahoma, and Jordan Gilbert out of LSU. Any of those guys could be impact players. The problem is I don't really know how it's all going to sort out and who you're ultimately going to lean on. We know Isaac Smith has one starting spot. You also have Braylon Womack coming in, who I think will have a chance to compete for a starting job right away. So any of those guys, you need them to contribute because you got so many holes to fill at safety. But because I don't really know how they're going to shake it out, I could see you going away there. Same kind of goes for offensive line. And I've already named 2 of the 3 guys that you would expect to play big roles, but Miles McVay is going to need to play well for State. LJ Perdome is a guy people have said is going to have to play well for State. Maybe one of those other young guys is going to have to play well. You could go anywhere you want to on offensive line and going to need State to have somebody to step in. But because I don't fully know how those roles are going to break down, I went with the other guys that we had. So there you have it, the 5 most impactful transfers, or most important transfers for Mississippi State football going into the 2026 season. Why are there so many transfers back and forth between MSU and Missouri? It is interesting. They've mostly gone to Mizzou, unless I'm forgetting guys coming in from Missouri outside of Marquise Johnson. It's been like 3 guys going to Missouri. I think the simple answer is you've got 2 programs that kind of recruit in a similar level, and therefore transfers kind of end up being the same. Thought Brennan could have gotten a waiver. Possibly – I don't think Brennan had the best case. And I understand this is an era where it feels like everybody just gets granted another year of eligibility. Brennan's case to get another year was essentially, well, I played a lot as a freshman, but they didn't use me on offense as much as they should have. And I'm not trying to be critical of Brennan. Brennan's freaking awesome. He's been nothing but a class act since coming to Starkville, had a huge year. If I'm just speaking, like if I'm breaking down what is the actual case for him, and I understand his second year at Oklahoma dealt with some injuries. he still played well over 4 games in every single season. If it was like a 5-game deal, I'd be a little bit more open to it. But, at Texas, his freshman year, he primarily played special teams, still playing time. Oklahoma, he got his opportunities in the pass game both years, then obviously Mississippi State. Does it suck to lose a year of eligibility when you're not seeing the field as an impact player on offense? Yeah, but at the end of the day, some guys don't get those opportunities as much, and that's just kind of a part of it. And I am sort of getting to this level of I'm willing to look at one guy. I'm willing to give like one extra year and say, okay, you had a year taken away from you truly because of injury. We'll give you that year back. Once you start talking about multiple years, and this is not okay with Brennan, this is where I'm at with eligibility as a whole. Once you start talking about multiple years, I'm sorry, man. Like, we can't be having 7th, 8th year college football players. I think in general, they need to cut back on a lot of this. And if I were to speak objectively, even though having Brennan back would have been awesome, I don't think Brennan had that strong of a case to return, ultimately. How about the 2s and 3s? We got like 20 new recruits, right? Yeah. I mean, look, some of these guys are going to be important as rotational players for sure. I think Gus Cordova at defensive end could be very interesting. Could he sort of hit on his talent level coming in? I'll also say, Jason Jenkins from Florida State, that's a guy that 2 seasons ago at Tennessee showed some impressive flashes and looked to be a guy that, hey, if you give him a bigger role and gave him a starting opportunity, he could really break through. And it didn't happen. Like, he got that opportunity at Florida State, didn't have the year he wanted to. Now, I believe did deal with an injury throughout the offseason that hampered his ability to maybe come back and develop the way he needed to. Regardless, he was ready come season opener and didn't have a great year for Florida State, now back in the portal. I don't think you're bringing him in to start. I think he is coming in to be a depth piece. And I think if you're Mississippi State, ideally what you're going for is he going to be that guy that he was 2 seasons ago, where he's coming in, we're getting him a handful of reps per game, and over the course of the season, he's going to he'll take advantage of a few of those reps and make some impactful plays that could be deciding factors here or there. That's what he did at Tennessee 2 seasons ago. Being an every down difference maker, I don't think you can count on that. Can he be that rotational piece? Sure. So that's kind of what you're looking at. I mean, Zion Ragens will be interesting as another guy, another speedster. How does Levy find a way to make use of him as another weapon coming in? The quarterback thing we talked about a lot recently. That's going to be very interesting to see if they had to turn to a backup, what direction they would go. Riley Williams at tight end, I'm interested to see because, I mean, it's such a big frame. Can he finally be that blocker State needs up front? But he's also got some good receiving ability as well. I'm not trusting he's going to be a guy that has a huge season, but, what type of role could he play? I mean, he could compete for a starting job, to be fair to him. I'm just trying to find through other guys who might factor in. I mean, I think you're probably talking about at corner, and I mentioned it earlier, Caleb Singleton is probably your best bet. I'm a little skeptical on Jamrock Grimsley, just in the fact that a guy at this point, if a guy hasn't really found a way to get a part of the rotation, typically those guys don't always pan out. But where I'll be fair to Grimsley is, like, he did deal with an injury last season, and his true freshman year, you don't really take much away from it, so he could break through. They're going to definitely need some of these guys to make an impact right away. I think there's a couple freshmen. I mean, Zayon Cotton at tight end, I think, is going to be able to play a big role. I talked about Womack and Nickerson as guys who have an opportunity. Nickerson can get the body to where it needs to be, and then Womack, just how ready is he right away? So, I mean, they got new guys who are going to play a role for sure. But they're bringing back a lot. I mean, I've talked about this before. They have a lot of things going for them in terms of experience, and there's a lot of positions I look at and think they're in really good shape. It really comes down to, can they get a couple of those offensive and defensive linemen to click the way they need them to? That is going to determine so much for this team. I think that's going to do it for me tonight. Obviously a shorter show, but didn't have too much to get into. So we went through some of the more transfer stuff. Enjoyed the back and forth. Shout out to Blow Up Mississippi. Love having you in the chat. But yeah, I think we'll call it a night there. Appreciate everyone who tuned in. If you haven't already, please leave us a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, have the notifications turned on so you do know when we do go live. I'll be back Monday night. I think it may be time to start looking ahead to the depth chart. I'm not going to make that a promise yet if that's going to be the topic for sure, but feel like we're at that point. We can start having some early projections of what is this starting lineup going to look like for Mississippi State. So that'll be some of the thought thank you, Bulldog Mississippi. Appreciate it. Going to be some of the thought for next week. Appreciate everybody listening. See y'all next time. As always, swing your sword and Hail State.
College football is even more exciting when you've got some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread, and I've got a 40-plus year track record. 11-0 in the college football playoff for me last year against the money line, 8-3 against the spread. And I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill of Wager Talk is our ace in the hole, show stopper. 7 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick. 28-12 against the spread the last 3 years. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Corey Bratta, Matt Zemek, and Steve Dace. Check out those numbers. Become a YouTube or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and then select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2025 a winner now.